Wednesday. It is Wednesday, and we'll keep you posted on all of the news coming out of Washington. We do have the Senate, the committee right now. Anthony Fauci has just taken or pleaded the fifth, and we're going to be hearing also from former Secretary of State Bill Gardner calling in this morning live on the New Hampshire presidential primary. Let's get to the basics. It is Wednesday. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards. Overcast right now and humid, and it is going to be a changing weather picture later this evening and through the night. Heavier showers and rain and some flash flooding possible or likely into tomorrow. So we have that for your weather, but hopefully warming up and being nicer for the weekend. As we get going this morning, J-Dog, do you want a number here for some reason? I think he's calling in right now, but he just called me on my own phone, the former Secretary of State. So I'm going to ask him.
I'll let you know.
Please call the number I just texted you, sir. So we'll see if he does, but we're trying to get through to be interesting to get the former Secretary of State, Bill Gardner's thoughts on the presidential primary as we get going. All right, but Anthony Fauci pleading the fifth and blasting Rand Paul, saying you release my unredacted personal diaries. So there you go. And J-Dog, we are getting a report our streaming is off again. So we have that going for us this morning. So there you go. But Bill, right now in Washington, we're gonna keep an eye on this Senate testimony going on. J-Dog, I need you to do something for me, please. Please tell me some housekeeping and sports for a moment. I'm going to call this person back who keeps calling my cell phone our guest. So, J-Dog, take it away.
Thank you. All right. Housekeeping. I think maybe housekeeping this early. That's what it's all about here. The miracle of live radio. Don't forget, by the way, next Tuesday, Jack will be broadcasting live in Franklin as the Easter Seals Veterans chapter, or the campus opens up or breaks ground on its second groundbreaking of the military campus. Jack will be broadcasting live from 9 a.m. to noon on Tuesday. So I'll be looking forward to that in Franklin. That will be upcoming on Tuesday.
Bill, can you call
and don't forget tonight, the Red Sox and the A's. That will be a 8:40 pregame, 9:40 first pitch. I'll have the probables for you as well as the betting line coming up later on today. And I'll also have my NH Dollar Saver deal of the day. And as I said, Jack will be broadcasting live for a live show on Tuesday, August 4th from 9 a.m. to noon. The Easter Seals New Hampshire Military and Veterans Campus, which is in Overtime with Mike and the Hoss, which is presented by Maine Love Water, as well as the playback. Sutton Seaver, 2 300 game winners, duking it out at noon today on the playback on the Pulse Podcast Network. That's under the Bet This umbrella.
All right. We're going to be getting our guests in a moment. We're going to have more from the Senate this morning. What's that, J-Dog?
Get him now.
All right. And John Decker, our own White House correspondent, coming up as we get going. But I want to bring in he's the former Secretary of State, Bill Gardner, and probably has done more to protect and preserve and really fight and defend New Hampshire's first in the nation presidential primary for decades, really, in the State House. He's been the curator, the lifeguard, and the lifesaver, really, of the primary in the past when major parties have tried to screw with New Hampshire's primary and the placement. And Bill Gardner joins us now. Good morning, New Hampshire, the Pulse of an H. We got some phone demons out of the way. Good morning, Mr. Secretary. I hope you've been well.
I've been fine. Good morning to you, Jack. Good to talk to you again.
Okay, I just want to hear your thoughts. You know the story. We don't have to tell it again. I've been talking about it for a couple of days since Friday's vote. They want to nullify, punish candidates on the Democrat side if they come up here early, take away our importance. They did it before under Biden. They want to do it again. South Carolina, Nevada, sort of push New Hampshire back as I guess we're not diversified enough. Whatever reason, I know it's a bunch of you know what, but the point is you protected this thing. You fought for it. You spent a good chunk of your life preserving and protecting New Hampshire's first in the nation presidential primary. I and many people owe you a debt of gratitude. What's your reaction to this, and what can we do to make New Hampshire relevant and fight back, Mr. Secretary?
Well, we'll be okay in the end. The National Democratic Party has for half a century now tried almost every 4 years, they come up with some different way that they think they may be able to prevent New Hampshire from keeping its tradition. And I lived through it for those decades, and we will never lose the primary until there's a time that the people of New Hampshire no longer wish to keep it. This is New Hampshire's primary. This is paid for by the people of New Hampshire. They come out in droves compared to, there's no other state in the country that has had a primary in the cycles that we've had, at least that I've had, going back almost a half a century, just myself. And they participate and want it. So this time at this point in the cycle, they can be brazen and bold about it. But as it gets nearer to the national conventions, it changes. And we've lived through that experience. And some things in life you have to experience to really understand them. You have to have been part of it yourself and learn from it.
Yep.
And I was able to do that back in the early 80s. And we were threatened by Nancy Pelosi. She called me. She came to my office in the State House, and she said, "You've got to change this primary or you're not going to be a part of the national convention. You've got to change the date." And I said, the date is not going to be changed because we have a law that says how we're going to determine the date. And right. It's not going to change. And she says, well, you will not be part of the convention. New Hampshire's not going to be able to participate, and you'll never be elected to anything the rest of your life if you do this, because the people of New Hampshire can blame you for having lost the primary. So that was in the fall of '83. We had the primary. A week or two before the primary, there was a notice put out by the National Party saying it's all illegitimate. The primary doesn't mean anything, and you don't bother to vote. But then, after the primary, the delegates that were chosen, the Democrats, publicly made an announcement saying, well, we've been selected by the people, and we're going to the convention, and we're going to be at the door, and if they don't let us in the door, that's going to be up to them. Mm-hmm. But we're going to be at the door. And so months went by. The convention in that summer of '84 was in San Francisco. That's why Pelosi was named the chair of the committee to force states to comply, because that's where she's from. And they put out the last notice about a month and a half before the convention, saying, this is it, last call, New Hampshire. You've got to have some kind of a selection process or you're not going to participate. And then about 3 weeks before the convention, we get a call from Washington that, we really didn't want to say those harsh things that we did the last year or so. Yes, you can all participate. And so everything changes near the end.
Let me ask you.
They can be.
Well, you were basically politically intimidated, but not intimidated, because no one intimidates Bill Gardner, threatened, if you will, by Nancy Pelosi not to go first. You did not buckle. I didn't buckle at WMUR when CNN told me how many candidates I could have on a national debate we were airing, 8 Republicans or 9. I called you and you told me have them all, Jack. They're major candidates. They're organized. They're raising money. So my question, Bill Gardner, former Secretary of State, we will go first in the calendar. Democrats don't want us to, so they're going to do the same thing they did in '83. How can we get national Democrats to buck their own DNC and come up to New Hampshire early and visit and not be threatened and intimidated, or our delegates intimidated? Are the local Democrats, Gene Shaheen, Maggie Hassan, Chris Pappas, Mackie Goodlander, Ray Buckley, are they fighting as hard as they can? How do we tell them to go pound sand?
Well, in the past, a lot of people took part in that process. And it is amazing to me that we have 4 members of the Congress now. Well, one of them, Maggie Goodlander, wasn't involved until a year ago. But before that, where are they? I mean, there's no Republicans representing the state of New Hampshire in Washington. And yet it's the Republicans. But it's always been the Republicans that have stood up for New Hampshire. They've stood up for it as a state. I mean, we have done nothing to deserve having it taken away. There's been no scandals, everything. It's the most open process imaginable. Anybody can come in and file. And that's so important at the beginning of this process, that to live the American dream, that anyone can someday possibly become president. New Hampshire provides that. Why they want to take that away is so repugnant. There's no explanation except for the pure want of power. They want the power to choose rather than the people. And New Hampshire has been an anathema to them because you can't control New Hampshire. We don't have a major corporation that hires a third of the population. In a lot of states, there's kingmakers.
Yep.
We don't have kingmakers. The kingmakers are the individuals, the people that come out and vote. And we've done a good job.
I agree, Mr. Secretary. And we also know the results of the vote the night that it happens. We're not counting votes for 2 weeks. And we do elections pretty well. Do you know in 2024, in the unauthorized Democrat primary here in New Hampshire, that the Democrats and Joe Biden in the White House tried to take away, so it started in South Carolina? Do you know that New Hampshire had like 124,000 votes in the Democrat unauthorized write-in primary? In South Carolina, a state about 3 times the population, had about the same number of votes, which was 4% of registered statewide voters. So we know how to vote here.
Well, the difference is South Carolina, whenever there was an issue, the Republican who sets the date for the Republican primary, because the parties set the date, the parties decide whether to have a primary.
Right.
And so what was unusual the last time was that there was no Republican primary. So you don't have to be a registered Democrat like you have to be in New Hampshire to vote in the Democratic primary.
Right.
And that happened in 1968 in Michigan. People couldn't understand how George Wallace, a right-to-work governor in Alabama, could win the most unionized state in the country, Michigan.
Wow.
And the Democrats were so mad about that they took it all the way to the Supreme Court and said, we should have the right not to have people of the other party participating.
I think
come full circle to South Carolina in 2024, and there was no Republican presidential primary because they gave all the votes. The party just said it's going to be Trump. He's the incumbent. And so what happened?
Well, let me ask you that. We got to run, but my question is: you think that we'll be okay in the end this time around, or not?
We will have the first of the nation primary, and as long as the people of this state continue to have the will for it, it will happen. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of whether the question of the candidates coming. Candidates will
Right.
come, but if we have indications or there's a feeling that we're not pushing as hard for it, and that's why it's so important.
Yep.
The delegation, the people
Well-
in Washington that represent the state, they're in the party that's doing this.
That's why I asked you. That's why I asked you, do you think Senator Shaheen and Hassan and Maggie Goodlander and Chris Pappas should be making more of a racket publicly to make the noise, to let the candidates know you're coming, come to New Hampshire, don't be afraid of the political bosses that want to pick versus vote?
Well, they need to do everything they
Okay.
possibly can, and
Well,
that's they. I've been through it.
I know.
I had the National Association of Secretaries of State. It was 50-50,
Right,
Republican and Democrat.
Right,
They, for 2 decades, supported New Hampshire and Iowa.
right.
The
Well, you
lieutenant governors, we reached out to a lot of different groups
Right.
and did the work. Now, but the
I have-
times are changing, and
we have to
maybe there are people.
We have to run, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate it. We have a break we have to get into because of the number of stations we're on. Bill Gardner, thank you for protecting, preserving, defending, and fighting in the past for our first in the nation presidential primary. Your basic message, as long as the people care about it and participate and fight for it, we'll have it. But our delegation needs to do more. I think that's the fair summary. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Thank you, sir, for all you've done so that we have a primary to fight for. I appreciate it very, very, very much. Thank you, Mr. Bill Gardner. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. You
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with John Decker, our White House correspondent. Fauci on the Hill, a war that doesn't seem to want to end in Iran or the Middle East. Back in a moment.
Register now for
because yesterday was a big day. The president of the United States met with two world leaders at the White House. One, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, a big strategic meeting with the war in the Middle East and all the ramifications, and with President Zelensky with the war in Ukraine and Russia. Big stuff. But as that was happening, a poll shows that just a simple question: does President Trump have the right priorities? And 73% say no on things like inflation and gas prices, because they're losing support of the war in Iran. I know wars are hard, but I just want to frame that. But a big day yesterday, meeting with two world leaders. Take it away, John.
Well, that's right. This is a playbook that we've seen before. We've seen presidents focus on foreign policy, and then they often focus on things that are not the focus of the electorate. I think back to George H.W. Bush, in the aftermath of the Persian Gulf War, and of course his run for re-election, which did not go well. Now, there's a midterm election that will happen in less than 4 months. I have no idea how that's going to end up. History tells us it's difficult for Republicans to hold on to the House and the Senate. That's what history tells us for the party in power. And as for those meetings that took place yesterday, both of those leaders that you mentioned, President Zelensky, Prime Minister Netanyahu, both of those leaders calling the meetings productive. And in fact, it was productive for Ukraine because last night, of course, the Senate passed that bipartisan Russia sanctions bill, which had been languishing in the Senate, and it passed with strong bipartisan support.
And we're gonna, and obviously with the Lindsey Graham service and tribute yesterday, it was a very busy day. And of course, today is another raucous day on Capitol Hill with Anthony Fauci taking the fifth.
Yeah.
But is it just me, John? I'm out there. You're there covering the White House. You see the staff. You see the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt from New Hampshire. You see the president. Is he showing signs of frustrations yesterday, meeting with these world leaders, focusing on the war in Iran in terms of where this goes? Now we're doing more with the Saudis on some strikes in Iraq on Iranian targets. It is getting convoluted and kind of deeper, not shallow. Or does any signs of wear and tear showing or not?
I haven't detected any. The president, I think, is frustrated, of course, with Iran because, of course, the president has given them an opportunity to have a diplomatic off-ramp to end this conflict. And we saw what happened last night. Surprise attack by the Iranian military on American military bases in the region. So that's got to be really frustrating for President Trump.
All right, John Decker, our own White House correspondent. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, a lot going on Capitol Hill. Brad Card will be coming up. Quite a showdown. Since I'm on live here, I can't really capture all the moments between Anthony Fauci and Rand Paul in the Senate on this hearing this morning on more questions about what Fauci knew when, and did he change his tune about the origin of the virus? Because this stuff does matter. He was he was the doctor. He was the medical chief, if you will, overseeing much of the COVID policies and dialogue and narrative and lockdowns and everything else. And it does matter. Did this originate in a engineered, lab in Wuhan, or from a bat, or in a meat market? And those things matter because it could happen again. So they're trying to get to the bottom of it. But Fauci has pleading the fifth, blasting Rand Paul for releasing his unredacted personal diary. Probably something, I guess, a little lesson there. If you're fighting a pandemic and you're the lead healthcare official, you probably shouldn't keep a personal diary about yourself and how famous and important you are. But what do I know? Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. Play the pulse of an age. Bill Gardner, just an interesting interview, former Secretary of State who fought to protect and preserve and defend New Hampshire's first in the nation presidential primary, saying that the current delegation of Democrats has to do more to fight their own party to get major candidates to come to New Hampshire. And he said, as long as the people here vote and want the primary, we'll have it. Once they lose interest, we lose it. So you have to fight for it. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the pulse of an age. Back in a moment.
News, information.
Sure.
All right, just summing up some of Bill Gardner's remarks, former Secretary of State, very interesting interview. Brad Card, one of our political analysts and All-Stars, co-host as well as Contact Politics host, and we're going to have a great national guest today in our latest edition. But Brad, very clear. I don't know if you heard the interview, Bill Gardner, very clear because he is, you know him well, Brad Card. Good morning.
Hey.
Yeah,
I know Bill well. He's great.
He fought for decades against Republicans, Democrats. He told the story about Nancy Pelosi coming into his office in the early 80s and threatening him to move New Hampshire's primary. He did not. He said this, Brad, when I pressed him on, what do we do now? What do we do now that the National Democrats want to make our primary irrelevant and threaten candidates from coming up here and go South Carolina, Nevada? He said, as long as the New Hampshire people want it and vote for it and take part, we'll keep it. But our federal delegation, which happens to be all Democrats right now, he said they need to fight their own party harder to not threaten national Democrats from coming up here to make us relevant. And I think that's sort of the summation. So I would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And that as we've talked about it before. I mean, look, the delegation did put out a statement, and a united statement calling for New Hampshire's first in the nation primary. So I give the Democrats, the federal delegation credit for doing that. But he's right. They need to fight and they need to push back against the Democrat Party. And there's a whole lot of reasons why they should do it. And first of all, it's good for New Hampshire. So if you're from New Hampshire, you should be doing that. But secondly, I think it's good for the process.
Mm-hmm.
The process is open and it allows for candidates that are lesser known to actually come to New Hampshire. It doesn't prohibit somebody from participating. Certainly it's more inclusive. And yes, you can have a candidate win that probably or may not win the nomination. That's happened several times, but the process works and it does whittle down candidates and it gives candidates an opportunity to hone their craft, if you will. And I think it's good for the process. I really do. And I think it's been very helpful for a lot of people. Certainly saw what it did for Bill Clinton. So look at, I think it's a, I think it's a
Brad,
good process.
I'm not splicing hairs, but is our delegation a little bit nervous to stand up to their own party nationally? Because I'm not sure. I'm going to look at the statement. I'm not sure they insisted that New Hampshire should go first. They just criticized the decision, the vote. But I don't know if they insisted that we go first. We're going to go first by law. But should the delegation be telling national Democrats in their own party, don't threaten our delegates and don't threaten candidates to come up here? Should they be saying more publicly, not in a statement, but in person, like in interviews on social media? Should they be blasting their own DNC?
Well, to me, it shows power, right? There's power, and usually the power is done behind closed door, and you can see the influence that's felt. We've seen it many times. Obviously, Congressman Clyburn had a lot of influence over Joe Biden, and I think he weighed that power. He pushed that power with Joe Biden to change it to South Carolina. So I think that's a question that you would have to ask the federal delegation. I mean, they're not calling me for political advice.
No, right.
And I think that, but it does show a lack of influence, in my opinion, for the overall party.
Yep. Let's jump to Capitol Hill. I don't know if you've been watching any of the Anthony Fauci and Rand Paul in the Senate. He's so far, but I went on the air at 9, so I don't know. He's pleading and taking the fifth. He's not going to answer questions. He blasted Rand Paul for releasing his personal diary, said that he's had a vendetta against him. You've seen excerpts. Where does this thing go after today? Is it just political theater?
It goes nowhere. It goes nowhere. It's theater, and it's disappointing because there are important questions that need to be asked. Because he's been given immunity does not mean he doesn't have to answer questions, because it's because of the zealotness of Jim and Paul. He has gone after him personally and continues to, and he's released personal diaries. And he's, I think a reasonable person would say he's shown a bias against Dr. Fauci. And so any reasonably good attorney, in my opinion, would counsel his client to not answer any questions.
Yeah, because you just got to.
And also Chairman Comer in the House has said that his liability is not, he still could have liability testifying before Congress. So if
Right.
the chairman of the committee is saying things like that, you send them in there and you tell them to plead the fifth.
Yeah, you don't want to incriminate yourself. Brad, let's switch gears. I asked John Decker, our White House correspondent, in the last segment. There's a poll. I know you're aware of it. One of the networks put out. It might have been CNN, but be it as may. I mean, they're one of the networks. Basically, I'm just going to say it to you. I want you to comment. Does Trump have the right priorities? Does Trump have the right priorities? And here we are, getting closer to the midterms. Yes, 27%. No, 73%. Negative, underwater numbers on the war in Iran, inflation and gas prices. React to that.
Well, first, we're gonna have Jim Ellis on Contact Politics today, and that'll be released sometime after 2:00 this afternoon. And we're going to get into it with these numbers, what they mean. But there's a lot of consensus amongst many senators that are up for re-election. They've got to get the president's approval rating has to be up around somewhere around 45% for Republicans to do well in these states. And right now, according to the CNN poll, his approval rating's at 34%. That's abysmal. And as the segment that you just talked about with the priorities, 73% do not believe the president has the right priorities. That's a devastatingly bad number. And I think the president does go off the rails a lot. He's still talking about the election results being stolen, which I don't think people believe. And it's not the priorities when he starts talking about the rebuilding, everything that he's building. I think he takes things that are good. We've talked about this before.
Yep.
You and I think, disagree a lot with it. I think he goes too far. And when he goes too far, people start to react. And that's what we're seeing right now.
Well,
I think people are doing it.
I think because of the war in Iran, I'll tell you what I honestly think. We have time for this, so I wanted to take a moment on this. I think the president, there's so much that distracts him, and he's the master of distraction. He throws stuff out there sometimes just to control the narrative. I think you'd agree with that. He tries to control. He throws this out here, and I don't want to go back 100 times. He'll throw something out about Greenland or, something else when this over here is burning. And, it's kind of like distraction. But I do think, and I said this back in March, a protracted, convoluted war in the Middle East is not a good thing, and it's not going to bode well in the midterms for Republicans because independent voters in states like New Hampshire are going to be looking they're going to look at gas prices, cost of living, affordability. What's that?
Wars do not go over well.
Right, and it's three things: the economy, and I think the president has lost sight of that. But I also believe that he started a war and got into a war that we didn't know how we were going to get out of, and we should have known that. You can't negotiate with terrorists. I thought we learned that. But anyway, now we're in a pickle because I don't know how you end this thing.
Well, Jack, I agree with you, but I think that this question goes to a whole host of things, not just the war in Iran, because they pulled that separately, and that does not pull well either. But you take a look at ODNI. You have Bill Pulte, who has zero national security background, never held a security clearance, talking about firing up to 40% of ODNI staff in the intel community, having never participated and not knowing anything about it. But he's already gone in there and cut 30% of the positions. And now Jay Clayton was just confirmed as the head of ODNI, and Bill Pulte is pushing back the president not to swear him in yet. He's got more work to do there. It's things like that people go crazy. It's things like that drive me crazy because I care. I worked with the intel community, and I see the professionalism of the intel community. Historically, nationally, those are people that are. They bleed red, white, and blue, and they're not Republicans or Democrats per se.
Yeah.
They are trying to do the right thing, and
I hear you.
Politicizing. It's terrible. That's the thing that makes people angry.
Right, I can tell you it is passion. Before I let you go, Brad Card, we'll have that Contact Politics later. Let me ask you this: I would argue that it's amazing to me that we can have this ongoing war in the Middle East and still have an economy where the interest rates aren't going to change today in the Federal Reserve. I do believe things are expensive, too expensive. I do believe cost of living is a critical issue for most hardworking people right here at home. I do believe that. But it's amazing that no one's talking about the R word with the economy and a war in the Middle East, the R word being recession. I would argue to you, despite all the things that maybe where President Trump is underwater in approval ratings, the only reason why it is not worse than Republicans is just the Democrat Party is so divided. You look at how divided they are. The socialist progressive push on the left. I don't know who the leaders are in the Democrat Party nationally anymore. It's not Chuck Schumer. I don't think it's Elizabeth Warren. I don't think it's Gavin Newsom. I think it's AOC. And I think that's the only good thing that independent voters are going to be confused about. Like, I don't want to vote for socialist.
Well, first of all, give President big credit for having a very good Secretary of the Treasury. I think the Treasury has done a really good job. I think Secretary Bessent's done a really good job. And I give him a lot of credit for our economy. And I think that our economy is very resilient, and that's great. I think where we're looking at with the war in Iran, I supported the president going in. I thought mistakenly, but I presumed, as every other president historically has, that they would involve their intelligence community and everything. But it's come out that, Rutherford over at CIA had not been brought in the process. We know Tulsi Gabbard, while she was ODNI, she wasn't brought in the process. So I agree. There appears to be a disconnect on what our objectives are and how do we get out of it.
And it won't be the first time it happened.
Oh, I give Marco Rubio a lot of credit for everything that he's done while he's Secretary of State.
Well,
I'd like to see him more involved with Iran.
I don't know who was involved I don't know who was involved with G.W. Bush when we thought we could build a democracy in Iraq, but anyway, or Afghanistan. And you look at what we should have learned in the Middle East. But Brad, we got to run. Contact Politics coming later today. Brad Card, thank you.
See you, buddy.
All right, coming up, Michael Graham. We're going to talk about Fauci taking the fifth. And is the New Hampshire Democrat federal delegation really fighting real hard, taking the gloves off against the Democrat National Committee to preserve and protect and defend New Hampshire's first in the nation presidential primary? Are they? Back in a moment.
107.7 WTPL. Jack Heath on the pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, welcome back. Well, there might not be as many fireworks on Capitol Hill this morning. Fauci's pleading or taking the fifth. But if you want some good stress release, or maybe stressful, I don't know, if you want some good reading this weekend and you want to kill a few hours, read his diary. It's pretty good stuff about himself. And also our presidential primary, Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal, nhjournal.com, has articles on all the above. Good morning, Mr. Michael.
May someone in your life, Jack Heath, look at you with the deep love and admiration that Anthony Fauci looks into the mirror with every day. May that happen to you. May you be that lucky.
I'm a little taller than him.
Well, so you'll need a bigger mirror.
No,
I
just
guess.
something about, I won't say it, shorter. Yeah, I won't say it.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, I feel you. Anyway, but that's fiasco. So fantastic job with former Secretary of State Bill Gardner. People ask why we haven't had him on the podcast, and I always say it was because the podcast is only an hour long, and I like to ask at least 2 questions. So, but man, he absolutely, people need to listen to this. Him being willing to, on the record, call out the congressional delegation for their lack of effort on preserving the First of the Nation primary. And I don't think that's really in dispute. Where have they been? I thought it's hilarious. He had these tweets that they were releasing. Chris Pappas released a tweet after the vote going, well, I'm not putting up with this BS. And he actually said the word, And I'm like, well, yeah, that's great, pal. Where were you a week ago, a month ago? And even this joint statement that the delegation released did not say we will have the First of the Nation primary. It just said we will continue to work to elect quality candidates. It explicitly avoided that. And Jack, what we're reporting at NH Journal this morning, nhjournal.com, is that some Democrats are already saying, maybe we can work around this thing. For example, Steve Marchand, I think you've had him on your show because he ran for governor. You must have done some
It's
debate
been a while.
stuff with him. And by the way, I happen to think he's a really smart guy, interesting guy. I don't necessarily agree with his conclusions sometimes, but he tries to be thoughtful about politics. He's the paid consultant for the entire New Hampshire House caucus in Concord. So he's not a nobody. He's strategizing with hundreds of elected Democrats. He says, you know what? We could actually have treat the First of the Nation primary like a fake primary, and then have our real primary when the DNC wants to have it. He says that might could be very, quote, actually be very exciting for us to comply with the DNC. So what he's saying is the First Nation primary would be on the ballot, but we wouldn't really do anything with it. And then we would comply, and this party would have its own private primary as they are ordered to by DC. And then at New England College, one of the most outspoken progressive activists in the state is Professor Nathan Schrader. And he said last night that actually, I think it would be great that what they've come up with is very good for the Democratic Party. I think it's a pragmatic, balanced cross-section of voters. So you got these, prominent in Democratic circles voices saying, hey, let the DNC win. And that's why it was so important for Bill Gardner to say, no, you've got to fight back or these candidates won't come for the First in the Nation primary.
But will they? Will they? We will.
And that really is the whole question. We've talked about the fact that Deputy Majority Leader Joe Sweeney, Republican, is proposing legislation. He's going to try to say that any political party that won't honor our primary, we will take them off the list of parties that automatically get ballot access. We'll treat them like the Libertarians or the other Green Party. You can get on the ballot, but you have to go out and get signatures, and it's a lot more work.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
I believe, because I remember Jeanne Shaheen when she was a state senator with Sue Casey and managed Gary Hart's presidential primary campaign. There's no one who really knows how important and how special our primary is than Jeanne Shaheen. She's retiring U.S. senator. So some would say she has nothing to lose to take the gloves off. She's put out a few statements about how hard New Hampshire works, how good our voters are. We're a small state, but we vet candidates. But she's stopping short of blasting a couple of political tomahawks, if you will, at the DNC. Is that because her daughter, Stephanie Shaheen, is running for Congress and probably needs the support of national Democrats? Is that the trepidation I'm sensing? I'm just being realistic.
Yeah, and obviously I don't have any inside information, but
No, but is that a fair
notable.
question? Is that a fair question?
Ray Buckley gets a lot of money from the DNC. Whoever the nominees of the party are going to be are going to get a lot of money from the DNC.
Right.
None of those people have said we are going to have the First Nation primary. They've not said that. What they've
It's
said
because
is it's a shame we lost.
They know they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them.
I can't say that, but I'll put it this way. It's like asking Anthony Fauci questions about what he knew about gain of function. It seems like you're asking the right questions, Jack. I don't have proof. I don't have an email from Gene saying my daughter needs your money. I don't have an email from Ray Buckley going, I need a lot of money to cover costs for my cabana. I don't have any of that. I just know they do get a lot of money from the DNC, and they aren't saying what the Republicans are.
I thought the DNC
have this primary.
I thought the DNC was broke. All right, thank you, Michael. Michael Griff. All right, top of the 10 o'clock. We have a great one. Anna Brown, Citizens Count. She's about as bipartisan, nonpartisan as they come. Just got to get her take, because one thing about citizenscount.org and her group is they are all about civic engagement, and she knows how much and what great percentages New Hampshire votes. And I totally understand, by the way. I hope you understand this. The reason why I'm fighting and making a lot of noise about this, I think it's worth preserving and protecting our history. If you listen to my show, I feel the same way about New Hampshire's early independent history. But I understand that the cost of gas and the cost of living is the top priority and more important to most people. I get that. But on the side note over here, there are some things worth fighting for. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards, Anna Brown coming up, and a whole lot more. Keep it right here. The Pulse of an H.